part two of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is needed for the second Exodus. I'm hoping you have already seen part one, which was released, I think it was about 3 weeks ago. If you haven't, the link should be in the description of this teaching. So it would be advisable to have a look at that at some point if you haven't already seen it. But if you have seen it, it should hopefully give the foundation for this teaching. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a very, very quick recap on part one, just for more understanding. And that will help us to set the scene, so to speak, for what is to come. Now, the whole point of this teaching has been inspired, I believe, by the Most High, was because of the times and seasons that we're in. And this is something that I've repeated time and time again over the last 2 years, so to speak. And it's no cliche to say that every day that goes past, we get nearer and nearer to the times of the end. And that's exactly where we are now. We're in that time where basically time has run out in terms of delaying the end times. The end times are upon us. And we need to get the understanding that is necessary in order to navigate through this period of time, which the scriptures describe as the worst time humanity has ever seen or will ever see. So this isn't the final period of time, because we know after the end time event, you still have the 1,000-year millennial reign of Mashiach. And during that time is another period of time of a lot of happiness and a lot of good things. And then after that period, there's another period of time where Hasatan is released to cause havoc again for a small period before he's finally put away. So we know this isn't the final period of humanity, so to speak, but it is described as the worst period that has ever been seen or will ever be seen. And so, therefore, we are going to need a lot of the Most High's understanding, his wisdom, his knowledge, and a lot of his support via his Ruach, via the servants and the people that he puts in our midst. And that is the only way we are going to be able to navigate through this time period successfully, is with the grace and the help of the Most High. And so this teaching is going to give us that foundation and understanding of where we are and some of the things that we should be thinking about going forward as we prepare for this time, as described in Daniel 12:1 and Matthew 24 and verse 21 as the worst time we've ever seen. So let me jump into the teaching. Hopefully you can see the screen and you can hear me all right. Part one of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is needed for the second Exodus is something that was, as I said, released 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And it was laying the foundation of why these tools are important in the times that we're in, because these tools are what will help us navigate through, not leaning on our own understanding, but leaning on the understanding of the Most High, which comes via his Ruach, leaning on the understanding that the Most High gives us when we study the scriptures and when we commune with him on regular occurrences. We will get more understanding and we will learn and understand new things. And so that's why it's so important to know what is happening, because as we know, the word is already our blueprint. It has everything laid out, and it is laid out in such a way that it's not for somebody to pick up and read and just get the understanding, because things are hidden. They have to be hidden from those who think they are wise, and they are revealed to those who are the true babes in the community, that is the children of Yasharal. And so we have to really understand these things so that we can be successful and we can know exactly what is happening. And I always say this: the Most High does not do these things in secret. He reveals it to his people, he reveals it to his servants, he reveals it to his prophets, and then the word should go forth. And everybody who is in the Most High has an opportunity to have this information, but we have to commune with him and we have to trust in him, and he has to be our source. So let's go through this presentation, recapping this part one of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is needed for the second Exodus. And in that part, we looked at the book of Daniel, where that was the primary focus of the study. And we saw how wisdom, knowledge, and understanding helped Daniel and three Hebrew boys, namely Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, to navigate their way through a situation they were in their various trials and their various tests. And we came up with an acronym of TDR, which stands for testing, deliverance, and then reward. So there is always a test, stroke a tribulation, stroke a trial. Then there is a deliverance from the Most High, if you are in the Most High, and if He is your source, if He is your refuge. And then after the deliverance, there is a reward. And this is a theme we saw throughout part one, where we saw these Hebrew boys on various occasions, starting in Daniel chapter 1, moving into chapter 2 and 3, where they were eventually thrown into the fire. And we saw how knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that came from the Most High saved their lives and gave them their reward. And so it was with the prophet Daniel himself, which we then looked at his own trial and tribulation and test in Daniel chapter 6. And we saw again how the Most High delivered him from a position he was in, but he required knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, which came from the scriptures, which came from the Ruach, which came from the Most High. And again, that was what helped deliver Daniel from his test and to get his reward. And it is no different for us today. The pattern will remain the same. It is the same pattern that we're going to look at. And this is what we are going to see in the times we're in, looking for our reward, which, as we talked about in part one, is the second Exodus, is the gathering as in the second part of the gathering, which will take place at its appointed time. So let us look at some things in this teaching which are critical to get the understanding of what we need so we can see this timeline that we're on and have the full understanding, so we know how to position ourselves, we know what to expect, and we know what to do. And we are going to start with the major place of prophecy in the book of Daniel in chapter 9. Now, the book of Daniel is full of prophecies from chapter 1 even, and chapter 2 when the king has his dreams and all of these things. And Daniel chapter 7 has a lot of prophecies, 8, I mean, all the chapters. But Daniel chapter 9 gives us an overall prophecy of the scenario that Daniel found himself in and for the future times. So this is what we're going to look at first of all. And I'm going to start in 24, verse 24, where it says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in the everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So I'm going to expound it slightly as I go along. This prophecy was an overall prophecy of what was going to happen from the time that it was revealed to Daniel, that was when he was in captivity in Babylon, up until the end times, the times we're in now and beyond. So that's why it talks about this being an everlasting righteousness and 70 weeks, something that we're not going to go into too much detail because it requires a lot more understanding and we want to keep it timely. But 70 weeks, so a period of 70 weeks was given from that point up until the end. And this is something that Daniel understood. Now, in verse 25, which continues in the prophecy, it says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall even in turbulent times. And the first part of verse 26 says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So verse 24 was talking about the overall prophecy from the time of Daniel's life up until the end times. Verse 25 and the first part of verse 26 was talking about a prophecy that was fulfilled when Messiah himself came and walked on this earth and after his death, burial, and resurrection. And that's why it says that after 62 weeks or 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, i.e., he shall be killed. But he wasn't killed for himself. In other words, he didn't die for his own sins or for his own unrighteousness because he was only righteous. We know that he died for the righteous sake of the Most High's word, which is to save his people from their sins. So Messiah died for us. He did not die for himself. So verse 25 and verse 26 were fulfilled when Messiah came during the first coming, if you will, at the time when he walked the earth. Then verse 26 goes on, and this now is for a future prophecy where it says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of that week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, and shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So again, verse 24 was the overall prophecy. Verse 25 and the first line in verse 26 was the prophecy of the past fulfilled by Messiah's death, burial, and resurrection when he was cut off, but not for himself. And the rest of verse 26 and verse 27 is for a future prophecy of the end time, the times we are approaching now. We are literally at the door of these times. So this gives you the overall structure of these prophecies that were written in Daniel chapter 9. And now we have this understanding. We are going to be focusing on the current prophecies of the times we're in, because obviously these things are up and coming. And what we need to understand is how long is the tribulation or the great tribulation or Daniel's 70th week. I've used various terms there because there are some different terms that people use. I prefer to use Daniel's 70th week because it is the whole week, it is the whole period of time. And obviously, when we say a week, we don't mean a literal week. It's talking about a week of years, which is 7 years, but we'll get into that in more detail. And so it says, how long is the tribulation or great tribulation or Daniel's 70th week? So firstly, let's build up some foundation about a pattern involving the number 7. Have we seen this pattern in scripture before? Is this something that happens on a regular basis? So let's first of all look at the 7-day week. Something we know is in the scripture that the Most High ordained. Leviticus 23:3, 6 days work shall be done, and the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings. So we know that time periods to the Most High, the first time period which he ordained was the 7-day week, 6 days, and then the Sabbath. So that's a 7-day period. And then if we look in Leviticus 23:15 and 16, it talks about the counting for Shavuot or Pentecost, where it says, and ye shall count unto you the morrow after Sabbath, from the day ye bought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, ye shall number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. So again, another period of 7 Sabbaths. So the Most High is counting time again in the number, using the number 7. And then we look in Leviticus 25 verses 3-4, which talks about the sabbatical cycle or the Shemitah count. And it says in verse 3 of Leviticus 25 that 6 years you shall sow in your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year, it shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for Yahweh. You shall neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. So again, we see another 7-year period of time, being 6 years to sow and 1 year to rest, similar to the 7-day week. So we're seeing a common theme of sevens. and in Leviticus 25, verses 8 to 10, where it talks about the counting for the Jubilee, where it says that you shall number 7 Sabbaths of years 7 times. So 7 years, 7 times, 7 times 7 is 49. And in verse 9, it says, then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month at the atonement. You shall make the trumpet sound throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. So you see again here that the Most High is using sevens to account for time. The 7 year sabbatical cycle, the 7 year Shemitah count can also be seen as the 7 day week and the 7 day weekly Sabbath for the counting of Shavuot, 7 Sabbaths. So 7 years is a theme that the Most High has used and does use for the accounting of time. And this is important because if we see this, we are able to actually have more of an understanding about what the Most High is doing. Now, when we look at this chapter 4 of Daniel 25, the humbling of King Nebuchadnezzar was a humbling period of 7 years. And in verse 25, it says, and they that drive thee from men and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew from heaven. And 7 times or 7 years shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth the kingdom of men and give it to whomsoever he wills. We know this is something that was fulfilled and happened back in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, that he was driven to the wilderness or to the forest as a wild beast, and he was there for 7 years. So again, the Most High using the number 7 to account for time. And then if we remember Pharaoh's 2 dreams that he had of 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows, and then 7 fat ears of corn and 7 skinny ears of corn. And we will know that Joseph, the son of Yisak, the son of Jacob, I should say, Yehuda's brother, one of the brothers, the 12 brothers, we know that Joseph interpreted the dreams to be 7 good years of plenty, followed by 7 bad years of famine, found in Genesis 41. So again, another 7 year period of time. In that case, there was 2 7 year period of time, 7 good years, 7 bad years. So 7 is a common theme that the Most High uses when it comes to allocating periods of time. And when we go to the book of Revelation itself, we see this book absolutely covered with 7 churches or assemblies, 7 golden candlesticks, 7 stars, 7 spirits or ruachos of Elohim, 7 seals, 7 horns and 7 eyes of the Lamb, 7 trumpets, 7 angels, 7 thunders, 7 heads and 7 crowns on the red dragon, 7 plagues, 7 kings, 7 golden vial judgments full of Elohim's wrath, 7 mountains. And there may be even more 7s. These are just the ones that I picked out. And because of this should be a clue to us that the Most High is telling us there's something important about 7s. If we haven't already seen it through the other examples used, this tells us that 7 is critical. Now, I have heard a few months ago a teacher who is in the awakening, who I believe was in churchianity or Christianity for such a long period of time, that when he's come out, he's literally tried to get rid of all his learning from there. And what he was teaching is that on the basis of Revelation having so many 7s, that if the tribulation or the great tribulation was a time that was a 7 year period, then the Most High would have said it's 7 years in that book. But he didn't say that, because he said 7 in all other areas. So it can't be a 7 year period. And he was teaching on a 3.5 year period. But we've already seen that when the Most High allocates for time for various seasons, it works out to be with the number 7. So all we need to really do is get the understanding as to how the book of Revelation is written, and then we will have the answer as to the question, what is the length of time of the tribulation period? We've seen that number 7 is constantly all throughout the book of Revelation. It is a number of completion and perfection. It is the number that the Most High uses to govern time. So that should give us the answer or the clue. Is the tribulation or great tribulation or Daniel's 70th week, however you want to refer to it, is it 7 years? And the spoiler alert is that the clue is in the title. Daniel's 70th week means a week of years, which is 7 years. So let's get into it. So in Revelation 11 and 2, it tells us that the Gentiles shall tread up underfoot on the holy city for 42 months. 42 months is 3.5 years. So this is what it says in Revelation 11:2. And in Revelation 11:3, it shows us that the two witnesses shall prophesy 1,260 days. 1,260 days is also 3.5 years. So we have these two periods of time, but these two periods are simultaneous. That is, they happen at the same time. So it's not two periods of 3.5 years, it's one period. And during that one period, two things are happening. Gentiles treading under the foot of the holy city for 3.5 years. And at the same time of that 3.5 years, the Most High's two witnesses are prophesying for 1,260 days. Both things happening during a 3.5 year period. We then have the woman fleeing into the wilderness in Revelation 12 and 6. Now, in Revelation 12 and 6, when the woman flees to the wilderness, this is a second period of 3.5 years. So we've had one period of 3.5 years. Then, when the woman is about to flee and flees into the wilderness, that begins a second period of 3.5 years. Now, we can understand that this is a second period of 3.5 years, because in Revelation 13 and 5, the beast which received its authority from the dragon was given power to continue for 42 months, which is 3.5 years. So the beast was given the power to continue what it was already doing. Since he's continuing to have this power, it tells us he must have already had power and authority prior, and that was what was allowing the Gentiles to tread upon the holy city for the first 42 months or the first 3.5 years during the time the two witnesses were prophesying. So now, in essence, we have two periods of 3.5 years. The first period, where the Gentiles were treading on the holy city and the two witnesses were prophesying for that 3.5 years. And the second period of 3.5 years, where at the beginning of that period, the woman flees into the wilderness and the beast, which had received its authority from the dragon, continued to have authority for that second 3.5 year period. So during the second 42 months, the beast goes after the woman and the remnant of her seed, found in Revelation 12:13 through to 17. And this happens at the start of the second 42-month or the second 3.5 year period. And therefore, it is in the midst of that week, because it's in the middle of the overall period. So if we have that understanding, we can see the answer to the question that the tribulation or great tribulation is classed as a full 7 year period. Daniel's 70th week is a 7 year period. Now, in churchianity stroke Christianity, these things are taught as standard. And I understand the reason why many people, when they come out of those things and come into the awakening, they want to separate themselves from some of those teachings, because a lot of them are mixed with things that are not truth. But as I always say, we have to be very careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not everything that was learned in those environments that was wrong. However, we do need to rightly divide. We do need to make sure that when we see something that seems like it has truth from that religion, we need to examine it and see where the flaws are. It's not everything that was wrong, but some things do have misunderstanding that go with it. But yes, let us make sure we understand that the tribulation period, the whole period of the tribulation, is a 7 year period. And this will probably highlight the point better, where you look at this table and on the left, you have the first 3.5 years or 42 months or 160 days, which I class as the tribulation. And then on the right, you have the second 3.5 years of 42 months, which are classed as the Great Tribulation. So you see in the tribulation, the first 3.5 years, Gentiles tread on the holy city, and the two witnesses start their ministry and prophesy for 1,260 days. Then in the second half, you see that the woman flees to the wilderness and the beast is given power to continue for 42 months. And the woman flees to the wilderness in the middle of the whole period, which is the beginning of the second 3.5 years or the second 42 months. So the whole period is why I like to class it as Daniel's 70th week, because according to the prophecy, we saw 62 weeks, then we saw another 7 weeks. 62 plus 7 is 69. We hadn't seen the 70th week. This period is the 70th week. And if we remember in Daniel 9:24, Daniel was told at that time that 70 weeks were determined for everything to be finished. So in that case, this period of the tribulation and the Great Tribulation is a 7-year period, and I class it as Daniel's 70th week. So if we have that understanding, then it makes things a lot easier as we start to unravel these prophecies for us today. The first thing is understanding the amount of time allocated is a 7-year period. And when we enter that period of time, everything will be clockwork because the prophecies have to be fulfilled. They have to be fulfilled according to how they are written, because the Most High can only fulfill his word. He is not a liar. He is Elohim of truth. So they have to be fulfilled on time each and every time. All we need is to govern the start, and then we will be able to see when everything falls within those prophecies. Now, the second thing to understand is who is the he in the prophecy in Daniel 9:27. Let's go back to that prophecy in Daniel 9:27. And it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause a sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation. And that is determined shall be poured upon the desolate. And to understand it in a bit more context, let's look at verse 26 again. Now, remember, I said the first line of verse 26 was fulfilled when Messiah came, died, was buried, and resurrected, which says, and after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And I said the rest of verse 26 would be to do with future prophecies. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and the end of the war desolations are determined. So the question I'm asking is, who is the he? The he underlined in verse 27, the one confirming the covenant with many for 1 week. So the he is the prince to come who confirms the covenant. Who is the prince to come? The person confirming the covenant with many in Daniel 9:27 is the prince of the people that will come and destroy the city and sanctuary. You see Revelation 11 verse 2, you will see that the holy city is trodden upon, and the he is the prince of the people that shall come. So as we move forward, it says, it is not our prince who was cut off. So we know that our prince was cut off according to Daniel 9:26, the first verse of that. So wasn't him that was cut off, that is the he, because he was not cut off for himself in the middle of the 62nd week, but rather it's the prince who will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. So there are two princes in those prophecies. The true prince, the Prince of Peace, who is our Mashiach, Yahushua HaMashiach, and then the false prince, who is the anti-Mashiach, the one who opposes everything the true Messiah does. So we are not looking at the first true prince, we are looking at the second prince. Now you can see that the prince that confirms the covenant with many, if you see Isaiah 28 verses 14 to 15, you will see what that covenant is. And that gives you a very big clue to where we are at the moment in prophecy. This covenant is confirmed for 1 week. We've already established 1 week is not a week a literal week like a 7-day week. It is a week of years, hence the term Daniel's 70th week. So it is 1 week of 7 years, which we've already established. And it says that he breaks the covenant in the middle of that week. Now, he is also identified in Daniel chapter 8, verse 9 as the little horn, who is the anti-Mashiach inspired by Hasatan. And some of the host of heaven, or the fallen angels, and him are described as the stars that were cast down. And he, Hasatan, magnifies himself even to the prince and the host. And by him, the little horn, or Hasatan, the anti-Mashiach, they're all one and the same thing. The daily sacrifice is taken away and the sanctuary cast down, found in Daniel 8:11 through to 12. So the he is the prince of the people that will come, and is also called the little horn in Daniel chapter 8. And therefore, that he is the anti-Mashiach. But not only that, in Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, and some other verses through there, you see that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate set up. So now we have 3 different verses in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, in Daniel chapter 8, verses 9 through to 12, and Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, and some other verses in that chapter are all talking of the same event, and therefore the same person, which is the little horn, aka the anti-Mashiach, Hasatan, who is the prince of the people who tread upon the holy city. So if we have that understanding, when we go back and revisit the prophecy, we will be able to identify exactly who is being spoken about and know who is not being spoken about, i.e., that the covenant confirmed with many is not the Mashiach. The covenant confirmed with many is the evil one. And that is the time frame that we are approaching, that there is going to be a covenant confirmed with many. And as I said, do this in your own time and do your own Bible study on this. Read Isaiah 28:14 through to 15 to see what that covenant looks like. Because again, as I said, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. A lot of these things were taught in churchianity or Christianity, but they are taught, although there may be truths in there, but some of them have errors. And for example, their teaching will be there is a 7-year covenant, and then the anti-Mashiach comes and makes a 7-year peace covenant. But if we read what it says in Isaiah 28:14 and 15, we'll see what that covenant actually is. And it requires some understanding, but this is why we have to rightly divide so we get the correct answers. So let's look quickly at Daniel chapter 8. Now, I'm not going to read through all of it because I just want to focus on the terms that identify the anti-Mashiach. So we see that in verse 9, it says, and out of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. And we see that in verse 10, that it waxed great even unto the host of heaven and cast down some of the hosts. So we already saw before that some of the hosts of heaven were cast down, i.e. the fallen angels and stars, to the ground and trampled upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. So again, we see the evidence here that the he is the prince of the host, the prince of the host of the fallen ones, the ones who were cast down, and they were the ones that took away the daily sacrifice. Something again that requires understanding to know what the daily sacrifice is. So this is Daniel chapter 8 showing us what we've just previously seen, that the he is the prince of the people to come. And in Daniel chapter 11, and again, I'm not going to go through it all for the sake of time, but we see that a term which was used in Daniel 9:24 through to 27, which is a flood, they shall be overthrown before him. The one where you see it's highlighted in blue. Also, the prince of the covenant. So again, if you read all of this in its context, you will see, especially in verse 31, an arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength and take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. And when you continue to read through the rest of this chapter, especially from verse 31 onwards, you will see all the characteristics of the anti-Mashiach, as in how he exalts himself above all and has no regard for any other Elohims or for Elohim. And you see all the characteristics of what he is. So this gives us the proof and understanding that Daniel chapter 9, Daniel chapter 8, and Daniel chapter 11, when they talk about the prince, not the prince that was cut off, that is our prince, but when it talks about the prince of the people to come, they are all referring to the anti-Mashiach, who is going to make his entrance very soon. And so let's recap on what we've established so far. That Daniel's 17th week lasts for 7 years. And it is divided into 2 periods of 3.5 years, the tribulation and the great tribulation. The prince who comes and confirms the covenant with many is the anti-Messiah. And the 2 witnesses begin their ministry and start to prophesy for 1,260 days. And this ends when the anti-Mashiach breaks the covenant in the middle of the 7-year week, or the 3.5 years. So the 2 witnesses begin their ministry at the start when he confirms the covenant. But after 3.5 years, that's when their ministry ends and they are eventually killed. And it's at that same time that the anti-Mashiach breaks the covenant in the middle of that 7 years. So after 3.5 years. So these are the things we have understood so far when we looked at the prophecies in Daniel 9. Now, further facts which are proven by scripture is that the 2 witnesses are killed when the covenant is broken after 3.5 years, Revelation 11:7. And at the same time, simultaneously, that is when the woman flees into the wilderness. And the woman fleeing into the wilderness is the second part of the gathering, which we find in Revelation 12:6. So the 3.5 years that comes first during the ministry of the 2 witnesses is when the covenant with many is given by the anti-Mashiach. So those things are all happening at the same time, and they last 3.5 years. And when the 3.5 years is over, the 2 witnesses are killed, and the covenant with many that was made initially by the anti-Mashiach is broken. And at the same time when that happens, the woman flees into the wilderness, which is the second part of the gathering. And that we know is also for times and half a time, or for 3.5 years. So the woman remains in the wilderness and is nourished for 3.5 years. So she is protected from the anti-Mashiach and all his schemes. She is nourished by the Most High and stays in the wilderness for 3.5 years. That is Yasharal in the wilderness. That is the second part of the second Exodus, if you will. This period of 3.5 years is called the Great Tribulation, and it is described as the worst time humanity has ever seen or will see, which you find in Daniel 12:1 and Matthew 24:21. So all of these things together show us exactly what we need to know of the tribulation being 7 years, of it being split into 2 parts, the tribulation first 3.5 years and the great tribulation second 3.5 years. The first 3.5 years is when the covenant with many by the anti-Mashiach is made, and it is at the same time that the 2 witnesses start their prophecy, and their prophecy and ministry, which lasts for 3.5 years, includes plagues and things that they can do as often as they will, as the scripture describes. And at the end of their ministry, after that 3.5 years, the 2 witnesses are killed, and the anti-Mashiach breaks his covenant that he made with many. And at the same time, at the beginning of that 3.5 years, the second period of 3.5 years, the woman flees to the wilderness as she is protected from the anti-Mashiach. And the second Exodus, the second part of it, takes place. So, going back to a dream I had in 2022. Now, I've made a video of this, which was in December 2023, so approaching a year ago now. And if you haven't seen it, I've left the link in the description. But to give a brief recap, during this dream, which I had in early 2022, I saw a member of my family who was sick at the time. I saw them pass away. This is in the dream. And when I saw them pass away, I saw the skies looking like they were filling with darkness, and darkness was starting to descend on the area that I was seeing. And when I saw this, I took this to mean that when the person in the dream dies, then the darkness will come. Now, I didn't have an understanding what the darkness was. And I thought because I could see darkness in the skies, it was darkness across the land, similar to the plague or the ninth plague that Moses exhibited in during the first Exodus. So I could see that that was happening and the darkness was coming. And then obviously that was the end of the dream. So the interpretation I had was that when this person dies, darkness is coming across the land. And as I say, this dream I had in 2022, I believe it was in February. The link for the video is in the description. If you watch it, it goes into a lot more detail. And then in 2023, at the end of 2023, the person that I saw in the dream in my family passed away. So when I had the dream, they were still alive in real life, but almost a year and a half later, they passed away. And that told me that if my dream is correct in terms of my interpretation, that means that darkness is going to come during the course of 2024 because this death happened at the end of 2023. So that means that in 2024, according to the dream that I saw, darkness was coming at its appropriate time. And because I was associating that darkness with one of the plagues that Moses administered in the first Exodus in Mitzrayim, when the children of Yasharal left Egypt, I thought that was the ninth plague, as in the 3 days of darkness that you saw over the land. That was my understanding. And so 2024 came, and this is something that many people were looking out for, and many people were believing that 2024 is a big year. And according to my dream, we were going to see darkness. And because we know that the thing that have been is the thing that shall be, I was looking at it to come around the time that it came the first time in the first Exodus, which was during Passover, which generally many people consider to be during the month of April or late March, depending on when it falls for that particular year. But obviously, we went past that time period and I didn't see any darkness. And we saw many signs. We saw like the solar eclipse, the full eclipse in the USA. We saw like many different things that have happened that we all have understanding of. But actually, nothing really dramatic has happened. Yes, there have been things going on around the world, various wars, rumors of wars, all the things that is lifted in Matthew 24 as birth pains, but we haven't seen anything specific or particular. And then as I started to study the scriptures more and seek the Most High more and see what the answer was for this dream, where is the fulfillment, the Most High took me to this scripture in the book of Amos, chapter 5, where it says, "Woe unto you that desire the day of Yah. To what end is it for you? The day of Yah is darkness and not light." And as I continue to read this scripture where it says, "As if a man did flee from a lion and a bear met him, or went into the house and leaned his hand on the wall and a serpent bit him." As I continue to read it, it said, "Shall not the day of Yah be darkness and not light, even very dark and no brightness in it?" And as I started to meditate on those scriptures, the full revelation of what the dream meant came to me. That is that the darkness that I saw in the dream was a darkness in terms of the time period we were in, which we've already seen is described as the worst period that humanity will ever see. And so it wasn't necessarily a physical darkness, although that being said, I do believe a physical darkness will come with it, as we have seen in the past during Moses' time. But it was saying that the day of Yah, another term used for Daniel's 70th week, or for the great tribulation and tribulation, that during that day, the day of Yah is darkness and not light. It is extreme darkness, very dark with no brightness in it. So that dream, as I revisited it, told me that the darkness I saw at the time would come in 2024. But now the understanding is not that it would be darkness as in 3 days of darkness, though that may also come. But the understanding was that the darkness is that period of time, meaning that the great tribulation stroke Daniel's 70th week is about to start, because it said that when the person in the dream dies, that is when the events you are looking out for will be seen, i.e., the things that were all in prophecy will be fulfilled when that person died. And that person died in 2023, at the end of 2023, which meant that 2024 was going to be the year that this period of darkness, the worst time humanity has ever seen, will start. And if we have any understanding of how the patterns of seven work, the 7-year period, I've covered this before on previous teachings. If we have any understanding, the 7-year period always starts at Feast of Trumpets or the Day of Atonement, because that is when the year changes. And again, I've covered this on previous teachings, so I don't want to go off track. But we know that when it comes to Passover season, usually March or April, that is when the year begins for the feast season, the counting of months, the beginning of months, as it says in Exodus 12, verses 1 through and 2. But when we talk about when the year changes, the head of year, that starts at the Feast of Trumpets, because the Feast of Trumpets, if you look in Leviticus 23, is the only feast day that starts on the first day of the month, the first day of the 7th month. So that is when the year actually changes. And on the 10th day of the 7th month is when the year changes, when it's a Jubilee year. So either way, what this tells me, based on the new understanding of the dream from 2022, is that Daniel's 70th week, the day of Yah, the darkness period, described as the worst time humanity has ever seen, will start between the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement, which falls late September to early to mid October 2024. So basically within the next 2 weeks. And now that we understand the prophecies, because we can identify the start of that period, it means we can also identify all the events within there, because all we have to do is just put the times in. If Daniel's 70th week starts in 2 weeks' time, we know that there's going to be 7 years left, and we know in the middle of that 7 years is when that covenant will be broken, is when the 2 witnesses will be killed, and is when the children of Yasharal will flee to the wilderness. The woman flees to the wilderness. And that is the understanding as to when the second Exodus, the second part of the second Exodus, the supernatural part, the part that the Most High is going to do supernaturally, that is when that event will take place. Now, a lot of these things are heavy to understand, because I know that many of us are desiring to see these things come to pass, and we will see them come to pass because the Most High is faithful. But there are still things that need to be done in order for the scriptures to be fulfilled. And one of those things is that the scripture requires Yasharal, the people of the book, to cry out to Yah for deliverance. Now, when we consider where we are right now in 2024, if we look around as to who we believe are true Yasharal, the vast majority of true Yasharal are still living their normal lives. There is a minority of us who are seeking the Most High, who are crying out to him for deliverance, but the vast majority of our people still don't even know that they are the people. The vast majority of our people are still seeking the things of this world. They're still into the things of this world, not even realizing the times that they're in. Or they're people that don't even believe, they don't know what's written. So they are not crying out to Yah for deliverance because they think that everything is fine, or they think that everything is going to get better. It is only a small minority of us that are crying out to Yah. And when I say a small minority, I don't know how many that is in numbers, but I'm talking about when you compare it to the overall amount of Yasharal, it's probably only 5% that are crying out to Yah, a very small number. So we still need these things to happen for the scriptures to be fulfilled. Now we know what happened in the past happens in the future. The thing that has been is the thing that will be. And if you think about the time of the first Exodus, found in Exodus 2:23 through to 25, it says, "And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Yasharal sighed by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up to Elohim by the reason of their bondage." So the children who were in captivity in the first Exodus were crying out to Yah whilst they were slaves, whilst they were in bondage, whilst they were being treated terribly. They cried out to Yah. And when they cried out, Yah heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And Yah looked upon the children of Yasharal and had respect unto them. And this is something that we need to see today, that we are crying out to Yah, and that many of our brothers and sisters who have no clue are crying out to Yah for these things. Now, how are we going to make this come to pass? How are we going to make all our brothers and sisters, the vast majority who have no clue, who are not watching, how are we going to make them watch? The Most High is going to do it by Daniel's 70th week. The first part of Daniel's 70th week, which is about to begin, remember, described as the worst time humanity has seen, is going to be bad. And we know that the second part, when the woman flees, is going to be far, far worse. But because the first part is bad, we are going to start seeing persecution on true Yasharal. Now, we've been seeing persecution all along the line. We know that because of things like transatlantic slavery and all these other things. But what you have to understand with the persecution that has come, those things came because they were a curse on the nation. There was a curse because our forefathers disobeyed. And the Most High told us in Deuteronomy 28 and in many other places that if you don't keep my covenant, your future generations will be under this curse. And that has come to pass. But now when we enter Daniel's 70th week, the persecution will no longer be that it's a curse. The persecution will be that this is the anti-Messiah raining his terror on the Most High's people. And before the middle of the week, he is going to start it with some kind of covenant that he's going to eventually break. And that covenant is going to also include some persecution for the Most High's people. And it is that period that is going to make people cry out unto Yah. Because the only way we can get our brothers and sisters to fix up, in simple terms, is that they need to get some licks. They need to actually feel some pain, feel some squeezes. Not what we're seeing today, which is the normal thing in society that many of us of color suffer from. We are talking about more severe things that are obvious and that are things that people just do not want to go through. And so this is why Daniel's 70th week is starting whilst Yasharal are still here, because Yasharal have not cried out unto their Elohim. It's only a small percent. We need a bigger percent to cry out until it comes to a point that we've seen in Exodus 2:23 and 25 that the Most High heard the groaning. So he hears us crying out. He remembers the covenant he made with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And then he looks on us with respect because we are the children of Yasharal. So we need to cry out unto Yah for deliverance for the scriptures to be fulfilled. And that's what's going to happen in this next period of time. And Psalm 34 and 17 says, "The righteous cry, and Yahweh heareth and delivereth them out of all their troubles." And so if we cry out to him as the righteous, he will deliver us from all our troubles, because he is an Elohim of order, and an Elohim of justice, and an Elohim of truth, and an Elohim of faithfulness. So he will deliver us. But we need to cry out to him because the scriptures have to be fulfilled. And that is the job of the righteous. So these are the things we should be doing. We should be crying out to the Most High for him to deliver us during this period of time that is going to get really bad. And one of the ways I believe that the Most High is going to deliver us is he's going to make certain situations occur so that people can make their own way to a place where persecution is a lot less. Now, a couple of months ago, and again, the link for this video is in the description. I saw somebody asking, where's the link to the video of the dream? I believe it was. That is in the description of this teaching. So if you go there, you will find the link to that. I did this video saying, has the second Exodus begun? And because the reason why this teaching was done is because many people were looking around at the time back in Passover time, and we didn't see any physical Exodus. So we said, well, maybe the second Exodus hasn't happened. But I believe the Most High inspired me to understand that actually the second Exodus has already started. But the Exodus is not the Exodus we see in the middle of the week, i.e., in the midpoint of the tribulation. It is the Exodus where people are being inspired, where people are having opportunities and they're getting up and leaving many of the Western nations and going to the land. Now, when I say the land, I mean the African continent, where we know that the true land actually is. Where exactly it is in that continent, that's for Yah to know and for us to find out. But we know that the continent itself is where the people originated from. And I believe the Most High has been inspiring many people to get up and make that transition. Now, some people have challenges that means that they can't make these moves. That could be financial, that could be health, that could be family situations, whatever it is. And obviously the Most High knows every individual circumstance. But for some people, he has cleared the way. And since the time of Passover this year, it did start from before that. You saw many people transitioning, but it quickened. It happened a lot more since Passover this year. And now almost 6 months later, we are seeing that a lot of people have been moving to these areas. And when I say moving, I'm talking about migrating. They have been leaving their homes where they are and moving to these areas. And in my personal life, I've seen 2 or 3 different people that I know that have done that in the last 6 months. So I believe this is all part of the second Exodus, but this is the first part, the part where we have to make that move ourselves. And if we cry out to Yah, if we have that desire, because we want to escape the things that are coming in the first 3.5 years, if we cry out to Yah, I believe that he will make the way. And one of the reasons for this is because we've always talked about the first Exodus having a character who is the leader, who was Moshe leading the people, and everybody came to him. Whereas in the second Exodus, there isn't one particular person. And that's because everybody is scattered across the 4 corners of the world and everybody has individual situations. But when we cry out to Yah, as the scripture said, he hears us and he delivers us from our troubles. And part of that deliverance can be him opening up the way for you to make that transition yourself. So it doesn't mean he's going to pick you up and put you in the land, but it means if you have financial challenges, for example, where you don't have money, somehow, some way you come across some money that allows you to move, or if you have family situations that are preventing you from going, somehow, some way your family situations are resolved, or if you have health challenges, somehow, some way those challenges are resolved or they're made bearable so you can make that transition. And only the Most High can give you the answer for that. Only the Most High can be the one that creates the way. But I believe that if you cry out to him, as the scripture has demonstrated, he will deliver you and he will make a way where there is no way. He will make a way for you to transition into that place. And for those who he doesn't make a way, that means it's not your time to go. It means that your time is to endure until the point that he then physically removes you. But we have seen that that would be at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week in 1260 days from when that time starts. So we need to be doing these things, crying out to Yah, asking him to deliver us, asking him to make the way, asking him to open up the paths, asking him for knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And then we will be able to see how he moves. And it will be very obvious. And even in my own personal life, in the last 6 months, I have seen the Most High doing some things that were not on my schedule. I didn't see those things happening. And I'm seeing he's actually making a way out of situations I didn't think were going to be resolved, but I can see certain movements that he is making in my life. And I believe it is all in line with this first part of the second Exodus. And because the Most High is not a respecter of persons, I believe he will do it for any of his children that cry out to him, just as we have seen in these verses. As it says in Psalm 34, he will deliver us, the righteous ones who cry out to him. He will be our deliverer. He will deliver us. We've seen it in part one, what he did for Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and Daniel. He will do the same for us. Of that, I have no doubt. I leave you with the blessing the Most High gave to his prophet Moshe through the prophet Aaron, where he says, may the Most High bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance upon you, and may he give you shalom. Shalom, family.